I'm Dr. Mary Ann Dewan, Santa Clara County Superintendent of Schools, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 9th Annual Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. This year's conference theme of Inclusionaires Thrive is incredibly fitting as educators diligently work to ensure that students have learning environments in which each student can truly thrive. With a greater emphasis on well-being, inclusive practices, and the celebration of diversity, our young people are primed to thrive and pass along their collective knowledge. While educators are dedicated to creating a thriving environment for our students, we mustn't overlook the need to include adults. Educators need spaces that foster creativity and innovation, expression, and growth. To be able to truly thrive means that essential needs are met. There is room for both roots and wings, and individuals are surrounded by encouragement and acceptance. A key element to designing thriving learning environments is to broaden our understanding of inclusion. Normalizing differences gives us an opportunity to expand learning to encompass diverse approaches to education. During our time together, we will look at how the goals of inclusion have continued to evolve as we learn more about diversity and identity. We will discuss and develop strategies for advocacy and celebration, as well as make plans of action. We will have the opportunity to fill the buckets of others, have our own buckets filled, and establish inclusive environments. The Inclusion Collaborative has made significant strides in highlighting and addressing inequitable practices in our education system statewide. They work to eliminate barriers within the educational system with the Universal Design for Learning framework and the Ways to Equity Playbook and its enhancements. The learning and coaching offered by the Inclusion Collaborative make an impact and are key to understanding how to engage our most vulnerable students. Together, we must expand conversations about inclusion and belonging and take meaningful steps to provide the educational system in which all of our students thrive. During our time together, there will be opportunities for you to learn from, share, and collaborate with peers. Develop relationships across agencies to support inclusive and equitable practices. Receive important data and see various evidence-based practices. We will generate focused conversations and provide guidance for developing strong, sustainable, inclusive, and equitable practices, policies, and opportunities for professional development. The conference program includes varying topics that are meant to inform, inspire, and empower both you and your students. You'll hear from guest speakers such as Keynote Shelley Moore, as she and others shared their experiences in applying evidence-based practices, including Universal Design for Learning, a framework for designing lessons and environments that promote learning for all students. I encourage you to have courageous conversations that not only identify and address systemic inequities, but create a climate that empowers our most marginalized students. The Santa Clara County Office of Education is committed to serving all students in high-quality, inclusive educational programs. I know that this is a vision that you share, and I thank you again for joining us for these 2 days of learning, conversation, and reflection. Together, we can give all of our students the tools necessary to thrive in school and in life. You will be inspired. You will be encouraged. There may be new perspectives and viewpoints shared that increase your awareness and facilitate important, focused work locally in your schools and communities. Thank you for your participation, commitment, and work to ensure inclusivity and equity in education, which will allow all students to thrive.
Welcome everyone to the 9th Annual Inclusion Collaborative State Conference Pre-Conference Day. My name is Sandhya Lopez, Director of the Inclusion Collaborative, and I am so happy you are joining us this year. I came on board in January 2022 and was given a very warm welcome from the Inclusion Collaborative team and the Santa Clara County Office of Education team. I knew immediately that I was in a special place and part of a program that truly makes a difference in the lives of students and educators. For the first time in 2 years, our conference is fully hybrid once again. Thank you to all of our in-person and virtual attendees for joining us. We have a program that is phenomenal ahead for you and know you will leave this conference inspired to move forward on your own inclusion journey. Our 2022 Inclusion Collaborative State Conference theme is Inclusioneers Thrive. We believe that while this theme will resonate with individuals in different ways, this last year especially, educators and students understand the meaning of the word thrive in a very personal way. I would like to thank the many organizations and individuals who have supported the annual Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. Thank you to our Santa Clara County board members for their continuous support of inclusive practices. I would like to acknowledge our biggest inclusion champion, our own Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Mary Ann Dewan. Dr. Dewan works tirelessly to support equity and inclusion, not only for our own county, but also statewide. We are truly appreciative of her support and leadership. Another inclusion champion and dear friend to the Inclusion Collaborative I would like to spotlight is Mrs. Charmaine Mormanhoven, who has supported our efforts for the past 17 years, both as an advisor and funder. Last but not least, I must thank all of our Inclusion Collaborative staff who made this annual event a reality. We'd like to also take a moment to thank our many sponsors this year. First, our amazing inclusion champions, First Five of Santa Clara County, Strong Start, Santa Clara County Office of Education Early Learning Services, and the Western Educational Equity Assistance Center. Our inclusion leaders, Changing Perspectives, National Teletherapy Resources, and Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Our inclusion facilitator, Lakeshore Learning, and lastly, our inclusion advocate, the Discovery Source. You can learn more about our amazing sponsors by visiting their sponsor booth on our conference app. We could not have made this event happen without their support. Just a few housekeeping items I would like to review. Please take a look at the 2022 Inclusion Collaborative State Conference app. It has everything you'll need for this conference. We will be recording the majority of our sessions this year. Please check back on our website for more information. To access both CEUs and certificates of completion, please refer to the resources section on your conference app. Please note that these will not be available until the conclusion of the conference. We will have online evaluations provided to you via the app, so please be sure to provide feedback for us. Our hope this year is that you will learn and reflect on the sessions you attend. We also want you to become re-energized and motivated to continue this incredibly important work. Thank you so much for attending, and please enjoy the 2022 Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our first keynote presenter, Jess Bernal. Jess is a licensed marriage and family therapist committed to providing the best training, education, and support to those dedicated to providing care and building resilience in young children and their families. He is rich in experience in trauma-informed care and infant and early childhood mental health. His core values are an incredible reflection of our conference: inclusion, diversity, and social justice. Please help me welcome Jess Bernal.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 9th Annual Inclusion Collaborative Conference. I am so incredibly excited to be here and to be presenting to all of you on one of what I think is the most important topics for all of us. And one of my favorite when working with educators is really talking about wellness and self-care. A lot of the work I do is with trauma-informed care, and it really begins with us as educators. So really quickly, I see some of us are already chiming into the chat. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with the chat, and if you want to just type in, say good morning, tell us where you're at right now, where you're coming from. And the chat's going to be a great place as we go through for you to connect with each other, to ask me questions. I'm going to do my best to answer things that come up if I miss you. I'm going to try to save some time in the end to answer. And then really as we're going, because, we're still half in this virtual world, if anything I'm saying you can relate to, you connect with, please go ahead and type it in. I'm also going to ask questions to all of you for us to kind of participate and share, so please go ahead and type it in. I'm seeing things come up. I'm seeing some applause. I'm seeing some good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So yeah, like we just heard, a little of my background. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in infant and early childhood mental health, and really into early identification and prevention when it comes to things like identifying developmental delays and identifying trauma exposure. So one of the most important things in any helping profession, but especially in the education field, is being able, as a person who's providing any sort of service, whether you're a teacher, an administrative staff, a home visitor, whoever you are working with kids, is to be able to understand that this work is challenging, and if we want to continue to help others thrive, we have to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves, and that's going to be our focus for today. I'm seeing lots coming into the chat today. I'm seeing some good mornings. All right, we got some people in San Jose. Obviously, we're in San Jose. I'm from Los Angeles, by the way, so I made the trip all the way out here. The weather here is beautiful. Ridgecrest, Santa Clara. All right. Greetings, everyone, and let's get to it. Okay, so welcome and introductions. So I already told you a little about me. I'm seeing some stuff coming in the chat in terms of where everyone's from. So right at this moment, what I want you to do in the chat, type in your role, how many years, how long you've been doing, years or months or days you've been doing what you've been doing, and then in under 5 words, why do you do what you do? What is the why behind it? All right, and I'll give you all a second to type in. I know there's also a little bit of a delay sometimes in the chat, so we'll see what we get here. I love to know who I'm talking to, and I'm always very pleased when I ask the question of how long you've been doing what you've been doing, because when you add up the years of everybody in trainings and conferences and in speaking engagements, there's just so many years of experience on the screen, and it just shows that we can all still continue to learn so much from each other. Okay. Let's see. We're waiting for a second here. I'm still seeing people chiming in. Central Coast. Okay. Hey, San Diego. All right. Southern California representing. Okay. We got our first one in. 4 months. They work at SELPA and to support students. Perfect. All right, curriculum instructor over inclusion, classroom teacher for 24 years. Excellent. Wants to level the playing field. I love it. All right, what else do we have here? My why is to help students succeed. So this is a district support specialist, executive director, 8 years to educate, engage, and inspire. English teacher. Oh my God, I loved English. That was like my subject when I was in school. 10 years. Love teaching, including training specialist. 5 years. Inclusion is in my blood. Absolutely. I mean, I hope that is why we are all here, right? To level the playing field and create space for everyone. All right, let's see. A principal, 22 years OT, occupational therapist, to help my students learn. All students can learn. Yes. I didn't mention this earlier, but I started off before I graduated, got licensed as a therapist. I started off working in the classroom with children on the autism spectrum as a behavior intervention specialist, and that, I think, set the foundation for everything that I do, because in that moment I learned that no matter who the student is, no matter what, what their like abilities are. Everyone can learn if you attune to them, if you give them time, if you give them attention, you figure out how they're going to learn. Everybody can learn. I love it. All right, 7 years to support students, 10 years in the field. Okay, with behavior support, excellent. All right, just reading through, and definitely take a moment of yourself to connect with other people in the chat. 16 years, kindergarten teacher, 4th and 5th grade, 2nd grade. All right, okay, so we got a lot of different people and a lot of a wealth of experience on the screen right now. Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do this morning and why it's important. So as you can see on the screen, self-care is a trauma-informed care practice, and resilience begins with us. A huge portion of the work I do is trauma-informed care, and if you're coming to my in-person training tomorrow, which I hope you all will be, I'm going to be talking about what trauma looks like in children, how trauma impacts child development, behavior, all of that, right? But before we get to that, we really got to fill up our own cup first, and we have to talk about how we can care for ourselves so we can continue caring for everybody else. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to explore life stressors, work stressors, right? All of these things that happen to us at home, happen to us at work, they all make up things that impact our ability to show up every day and impact our wellness. We're going to talk about things like compassion fatigue and secondary trauma. We're going to identify the signs of burning out, right? So one of the big takeaways I want y'all to get as we're talking about wellness and self-care today is understanding that we want to be able to identify when we're starting to feel that sensation of burnout so we can up our self-care. I'm going to talk about this again, but the goal is, in this field, the goal is not to be like, I'm never going to be overwhelmed, I'm never going to be burnt out. The goal is to identify when you are burning out so you can improve your self-care skills and be able to continue to do the work that you're doing. We're going to explore our current understanding of and barriers to self-care, right? So one of the ways that we can ensure that we're implementing a strong self-care program for ourselves is to understand what's getting in the way. If self-care was easy, 1, this job would be easy, which it's not. 2, I wouldn't be here giving this presentation across different education fields and helping professions. This is a need, and self-care can be very hard, especially for people in the helping profession. And last but not least, we're going to learn simple strategies that you can easily implement into your day-to-day life. So, and we'll talk about more about this as we get into the presentation today. But oftentimes when we think about self-care, we think about that vacation that we're going to take down the line, maybe 4 or 5 months from now, or we think about, that trip to the spa that we're going to take in 3 weeks, and we're white knuckling it through months of really exhausting work, right? So really what the goal is figuring out how you can, and I'm going to use this metaphor throughout the day this morning, is that if we're filled with liquid, right? We're like a cup, and we're pouring out self-care. We're pouring out care for everybody around us. We have to be refilling our cup, and we can't wait till that cup gets empty to refill it. We have to be refilling it as we go. And we're going to talk about strategies that we can implement in our day-to-day to ensure that we're keeping our cup as full as possible so we continue to keep caring for others. Okay, before we get into it, I want us all to collectively do a little check-in and do a little activity, a little grounding activity to give ourselves time and space just to see how we're feeling right now. So in the education field and really any helping profession, we hit the ground running. It's go, 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 go. It's supporting children. It's supporting families. It's supporting coworkers. It's, we have all these plans of how our day is going to look, and our day never quite looks that way. So we hit the ground running. We don't have a lot of time to check in on how we're doing sometimes until we're at the point where we're so exhausted that we have no choice but to. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to put on the screen a series of different areas of our health, of our physical health, mental health, emotional health that I want you to check in on. And you don't have to share your score on here. This is really just for you. But what I want you to do as they come up on the screen is just do a quick check-in with how you're feeling in this moment and just rate yourself 1 to 10. 1 is like awful, no good, the worst. 5 is neutral. And 10 is extremely happy, healthy, satisfied, the best. What I want you to do as you're doing this check-in with yourself is I want you to just notice how you're feeling and not judge how you're feeling, not maybe compare yourself how you're feeling to somebody else. This is just for you to get present. We're just noticing and we're not judging. So we're going to start with our physical health. So just take a moment, kind of, get comfortable with where you're at in your chair or wherever you're seated right now, and just do a scan on your physical body. So just kind of start with your head, down to your neck, shoulders, arms, legs, feet. Just what do you notice? Do you notice any tension? Do you notice any pain? Maybe your body feels really loose and relaxed. Maybe you worked out this morning, so your body's got a nice little energy vibration happening. Just take a moment to notice and be aware of your body. And just rate yourself how your body feels on a scale of 1 to 10. And again, we're not judging, we're just noticing. Okay, so after we've done our physical body, we're going to take it to our brain and just check in on how we're doing mentally. Are you focused? Are you alert? Is your brain all over the place? Are you thinking about something that happened last night, something that's going to happen tomorrow? Just check in on where your mental focus is right now and how you're feeling in your brain. And again, just rate yourself from 1 to 10. I see some people writing numbers in the chat. You're absolutely more than welcome to share. If you don't want to share, you don't have to. And again, just rating yourself without judging, just noticing how you're feeling mentally. Seeing some 5s and 6 coming up, some 7s. We're feeling a little neutral, that's great. Okay, so we did our physical body, we did our mental body, and now we're going to check in on our emotional self. So do a little check-in on the heart. How are you feeling emotionally? Are you feeling happy, excited, overwhelmed? I know if you're in our live studio, I could tell you that our computer decided to restart 10 minutes before we went on air. So I would imagine maybe emotionally we're feeling a little overwhelmed over here, anxious. Maybe you're sad. Maybe you have a mix of emotions, and that's fine too. And just do a little check-in. Rate yourself how you're feeling, 1 to 10. All right. I got our numbers coming in, some 3s, some 5s. I see someone wrote in a little unfocused, I'd rather be in person. I hear you, I'd rather be in person too. Hopefully some of y'all will be in person with me tomorrow. Okay. I see some 10s and 7s. All right, so we did physical, we did mental, we did emotional. And lastly, we're going to do how you feel spiritually. And this can mean something different to everybody. This can also, if you don't identify with this category, you can disregard it. So this can be any sort, however you identify as any sort of soul connection, right? So this could be to the ocean, to nature, to coffee, to a higher power. However you identify this connection, just do a little check-in and rate yourself 1 to 10 how you're feeling. And again, we're not judging, we're just noticing, right? The point of this exercise is really allowing ourselves time to stop, slow down, pull back, and just check in with how we're feeling. And when we talk about wellness and self-care, this is really the essence of what that is, right? And if we want, I'm reading in the chat why we do what we do. We care about young children. We care about families. We want to make a difference. We want the kids and the families that we're working with to be able to talk about how they're feeling, to be able to regulate how they're feeling, and that's going to start with us, and that starts with present awareness, which is this exercise that we did right now. All right. I see a 8 or 9 for spiritual, and yes, coffee. Yes. I feel like of all of my spiritual connections, the ocean's probably the highest, and then coffee is up there too. All right, great. Well, hopefully now after that exercise, we feel a little more present, a little more grounded. Maybe type in the chat how that felt for you to just take, a few minutes to really dedicate to getting present. Let me know how that was for you, and we will continue on. Okay, so now that we're all grounded and zen, I'm going to transition us all into talking about stress and toxic stress. I know. We're all over the place, but I mean, this work emotionally is all over the place, right? So it's really hard for us to talk about wellness and self-care if we're not talking about the stress of the work that we're doing. And, we're in a very interesting place where we also happen to be in a global pandemic, still are in a global pandemic for the last 2+ years. And that adds a whole nother layer of stress to all of us. So in the chat, I know there's a little delay in the chat, so I'm going to see probably different answers for questions that I that I asked a while ago, but let me know if you've ever heard of the term toxic stress before. I would imagine working with kids, we have heard this term before. It's usually referred to when we're working with kids, and when you join me tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how toxic stress impacts kids. But I think it's important for us to note that toxic stress impacts adults as well, especially when we've all been through something that we've been through the last 2 years, which is COVID-19 global pandemic. So, types of stress. Is all stress bad? So again, delay in the chat, but please write in if you think all stress is bad. I usually get a pretty uniform answer for this one, which is no, not all stress is bad. There is actually some stress that is good. It's part for children, it's part of healthy development, and for adults, it allows us to be motivated. So like I said, 10 minutes before we were set to go live today, the computer decided to reset itself, and I think all of us in the room hit a healthy level of stress. And that stress said, hey, it's really important that we attend to this. We need to do something quickly to resolve this issue, right? So that's our body and our brain's way of telling us this is important. We need to put some power and some motivation into this. So same thing if you're in a job interview, if you're an athlete, right, and you play sports, you get a little stressed before the sporting event. Okay, good. I'm seeing some stuff in the chat here. Some stress is good. It can motivate us. We need a little stress to get things done. Exactly. So there is something called positive stress, and it's this kind of stress that motivates us, that allows us to get things done, right? So for me, I was a student athlete from, age 10 until 25, right? 21. And I had a pretty decent amount of stress before games because that was my body's way of saying, this is important to you. You need to put energy and focus into this. And it would build adrenaline for me, and then I would get out and I would play, and, majority of the time, I want to say this is in my, younger highlight, my younger years, but the majority of the time I would perform well, right? Because I had this positive amount of stress that was driving me. I'm seeing more in the chat. Yes, stress is necessary. Not all stress is bad, right? So positive stress is stress that is mild or moderate, right? And it's brief, and it's necessary for kids, especially for healthy development. So again, like I said, stress before taking a test, stress before a big interview. So when we're working with kids, they have all sorts of positive, healthy stress that they need to be able to learn how to manage. So this can be as simple as waiting your turn. That can be stressful. Sharing, that can be stressful for older kids. Having deadlines, having due dates for assignments, right? That is stressful, but it's positive stress. It's our body's way of telling us something's important and motivates us. Thing to note is it's not intense stress, so it's mild or moderate, and it's brief. It does not last long. So I want you to think about the last time you had a job interview, right? You're probably stressed out before the job interview, maybe within the first 5 minutes of the job interview, but as you settled in, things relaxed a little bit. I can tell you right now, first 20 minutes of this presentation, maybe 10 minutes of this presentation, I was feeling anxious. I was like, there's a new computer system, I'm not on Zoom, I don't know what's going on, but as I'm easing into it, things feel less stressful. the stress is able to reduce and it's brief. So that's positive stress. Then we have something called tolerable stress. So if positive stress, necessary for healthy development, mild, moderate, and brief, tolerable stress is more severe, but it's limited in frequency and duration. So in the chat, maybe you can tell me if anyone is familiar with the San Fernando Valley. That is where I grew up. It is in Southern California. It is a valley that is before Simi Valley, next to Santa Clarita Valley. If you're only from Northern California, you're like, I don't know what this person's talking about, but it is a valley in Southern California in which I grew up. Something happened there, if anyone's familiar, in 1994. In 1994 was the Northridge earthquake. I want to say, in 5th grade. So you can do the math to find out how old I am if you're curious. It was very stressful, right? It was definitely more severe than the positive stress that I experienced playing sports. It definitely activated my stress response, which we're going to go into in a little more detail in a little bit. But it was limited in frequency and duration, meaning that it was an earthquake. It happened. There were some aftershocks, and after that, it kind of, it wrapped itself up. Hey, Woodland Hills. All right, I just saw in the chat that someone, yes. So Christina, you probably know what I'm talking about. Or maybe you know what I'm talking about, or maybe you've heard about what I'm talking about. Within recovering from this earthquake as a child, I also had the support of family around me to help me recover, right? So it was like more severe than positive stress, but it didn't last very long, and I was able to recover with support of others around me. So this is also, other examples could be death or loss, other natural disasters, surviving a car accident, things along those lines. So that's positive stress, tolerable stress. And then we have something called toxic stress, which I'm sure some of us are familiar with, that work with young children, or if we're familiar with early childhood mental health, trauma-informed care, we may be familiar with toxic stress. And this is when the stress is extreme, frequent, and extended activation of our body's stress response. So this is a stressor that is happening very frequently, over and over again, and our body is being activated by stress over and over again. And this is for children without the buffering presence of an adult to kind of support them through that. I'm getting back to the chat right now. I do see the delay, but I have to give some shout outs to my family over here in Simi Valley and Woodland Hills and Cal State LA for your teaching credential. Oh, I love CSUN. I grew up right next to there. Okay, so anyway, thank you for chiming that in. So toxic stress is more of an ongoing, frequent activation. So with children, this can be ongoing abuse, this can be repeated exposure to domestic violence, ongoing neglect, or for adults, this can be 2.5+ years of a global pandemic, right? Where it is extreme, frequent activation of our stress response with seemingly no end in sight, or not knowing when the end is going to be. That brings us back to us and back to how the last 2+ years have impacted us. It's so, I don't know if sad is the right word, but I just want to point out that I've given a version of this training numerous times over the last 2 years, and this slide used to say toxic stress in the last year, and then it said toxic stress in the last 1.5 years, then it said toxic stress in the last 2+ years. So I really wanted to validate that it's okay if we're still recovering from what happened in 2020, especially the first, March, April of 2020. When we're talking about toxic stress, it really is being in a constant state of vigilance, right? That's what separates us from our day-to-day stress. So it's really, this day and age, at this time, we cannot talk about toxic stress, and self-care without talking about COVID-19. So in the chat, I am going to put a list of different, I guess we would say, like, impacts, different kind of symptoms, if you will, of toxic stress as an adult. So in the chat, what I want you to do is just, if you can relate to any of these things that you have felt over the past 2+ years while we've been in this global pandemic, I just want you to write in the chat if you can relate or not. Part of the reason I like to do this is, as you will find as I am putting these things on the board, is you're going to say, yes, I felt that. I thought that I was alone in feeling that. And hopefully within reading the chat, you can see, oh, I am not alone in my experience. So let's get into it. So how does toxic stress look like in adulthood? First one, greater sensitivity to anything stressful. In the last 2+ years, if you have felt like you've had a greater level of sensitivity to stress, let us know in the chat. All right, I'll give you a moment. All right, I saw someone wrote in the chat, oh, my good friend Amy, naming pandemic as toxic stress. Yes, it is ongoing activation of that stress response system. So let us know if you have felt a greater sensitivity to anything stressful in the last 2+ years. Let us know if you have had more intense responses to stress, right? So things that would happen, and this is just not just at work. This can be in your personal life too. Things that have happened that normally maybe would stress you out, but you have felt that your responses are more intense. I know within the first, I would say, 2020, March, April, May, I was having very intense responses to anything stressful. I felt like I was just ready to react. Longer stress responses. So maybe things that may have taken you longer to regulate from just lasted longer. Oh, I'm seeing so many yeses in the chat. Excellent. So if any of you thought you were alone in this, just take a look at the chat and you can see that you absolutely were not alone in this. How about challenges with memory, right? So anybody get that email from their boss that was like, hey, I asked you to do this 3 weeks ago twice and you still haven't, and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. Or maybe someone's explaining something to you and you're having trouble with your cognition, where it's like you're listening to them talk and they're explaining it to you and you're just like, what did you just say? Say that again. Memory and cognition, if anybody felt that over the last 2+ years. Maybe just feeling overall emotional, right? Just that things just feel more intense emotionally. Emotional responses seem higher. I see in the chat, oh my God, stress caused by closing the window of a virtual conference exam. Oh yes. I see some more yeses, some absolutelys. Memory is shot. Yes. So fatigue. Anybody just feel tired with what's happening? I see some yeses. I see COVID blur is real. What day is it? Absolutely. So if you have been experiencing, I think that's our last one. If you've been experiencing any of these things in the last 2+ years, I want you to know that, one, you're not alone, and two, there is a reason for this. There is a physiological reason that this is happening, because when our body is in this toxic stress mode where our stress response is activating over and over and over again, I'm going to break this down in a couple slides to get an even better understanding of what really this means. It's natural for us to have higher emotional responses. It's natural for us to feel fatigued, to have challenges with memory and cognition. Totally normal. It's what I like to call a normal we don't use the word normal here. What am I thinking? A typical response to an atypical situation, right? Having these feelings, having these symptoms, if you will, or stress responses, is a typical response to an atypical situation. Okay, seeing if there's anything I've missed in the chat. I'm just seeing a lot of yeses and relating. Tired Monday to Friday. Yes, I hear that. Okay, so that was COVID related stuff. So now what I want us to do is, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, go ahead and grab it. If not, you can just count in your head. I'm gonna list just personal stressors in many of our lives, and what I want you to do is just tally how many of these apply to you. You do not have to share your number in the chat. This is just for us. If you want to share your number, you're absolutely welcome to, but you're not obligated to. This is just for us to kind of see, in addition to COVID-19 and all of the toxic stress that we've been experiencing over the last 2+ years, what are some of the personal stressors that you may have? So I want you to give yourself a point if you are a working parent. So parent or caregiver, and you're also working. Give yourself a point if you are a single parent or you don't have a strong social support system. Now give yourself a point if you feel like you need to be perfect all the time. And for some reason, in every helping profession, this one seems to strike a lot of chords, right? I feel like there were a lot of perfectionists in our field. Give yourself a point if you are working and in school. Give yourself a point if you and or your family is struggling financially. Give yourself a point if you have people that you caretake for, whether it's parents, siblings, other family members, if you're caretaking for anybody. If you've had a significant loss recently, so this can be death, this could be separation, divorce. If you have a hard time asking for help, give yourself a point. If you have a history of your own personal trauma, however you define that, give yourself a point. If you or someone in your immediate family is managing any sort of mental challenges such as depression or anxiety, give yourself a point. So just tally your points. Like I said, you don't need to share them on the screen, but I want you to write in if you had at least one of these additional life stressors. Let us know in the chat. And the reason that I like to talk about this is that this is all the stuff that is impacting us in our personal lives. And when we walk through the doors, whether it's in a classroom, a school setting, wherever we're working, this does not stop existing, right? We can try to compartmentalize these stressors. We can try to push them way down. But when we're entering any other setting, we're carrying our personal life stressors with us. And regardless of how hard we try, at some point or another, at some level or another, they're going to impact us in the work that we do, right? We are still people, even as educators, even walking into the classroom, we are still people with our own personal struggles, and they absolutely can impact us when we enter our work. So it's important for us to, one, have empathy with each other, right? Your coworkers, seeing all the yeses on the screen, your coworkers are dealing with things that you don't know about, right? But even maybe more importantly, to be gentle and have empathy with yourself, right? You're not going to be perfect at this work you do, and you have things impacting you in your personal lives that, like I said, are going to come up for you. So just taking moments, taking time to be gentle with yourself and to be gentle with others. Okay. So, very important for us to talk about stress does not just exist in the workplace. Stress exists at home. Stress exists in the workplace. We put all that stress together, and this is who we are, right? With that, we have compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma that can happen specifically within the workplace, and that can really be the cause of burnout in our field. Okay, so I'm sure most of you have heard of these topics before. If we were live in person, I would say raise your hand, let me know what you think these things are. You're absolutely more than welcome to put that in the chat. I think because of the delay, it's making it just a little bit harder to kind of be that back and forth quick interaction, but definitely write in the chat if you have experience with either of these. So the first one is compassion fatigue, and compassion fatigue is really what it sounds like, which is we get fatigued from having such high levels of compassion in the work that we do. When you're working with kids and families in general, especially when you're working in the field of special education, because I think there's like an even greater level of compassion that we're constantly throwing out there for parents, for caregivers, for children, for, everyone that we're interacting with. Something can happen if we're not engaging in strong self-care called compassion fatigue. So there's lots of different definitions for compassion fatigue if you were to Google this. I really like this one, so I'm going to use it. It's the profound emotional and physical exhaustion that helping professionals and caregivers endure over the course of their careers, right? So again, emotional and physical exhaustion that we endure from being in a caregiving, helping profession. And this can include feeling physically and emotionally exhausted, lacking empathy, feeling irritable. So I can tell you I'm going to use my kind of therapist lens experience. For me, for compassion fatigue, oftentimes this looked like, having clients that I'd be working with, and I felt like I was working harder than them, and I would give them all the resources and all the referrals and all the things, that they could do to, help them with X, Y, and Z, and then they would come back and they'd be like, oh, I didn't do it, and then I would work harder and harder and harder, and at some point I just hit this place where I was like, oh, I'm so burnt out of like investing so much emotion. Sometimes it would even get to the point where like it would be like 2:55 and I had a 3:00 client, and I'd be like, oh, I hope they don't come today. And I was like, wow, that's not the kind of therapist or professional I want to be, right? But this is a result of compassion fatigue, where you just feel emotional and physical exhaustion from the work that we do. So the next one we're going to talk about is vicarious trauma. So just write in the chat if you have ever worked with students or families who have experienced some level of trauma. I'm sure most of us in this field have. Vicarious trauma is also known as secondary trauma, and it's very common with those of us that work with anyone who is a trauma survivor. So really what this is it's an experiencing lingering feelings of sadness, rage, feeling emotionally involved with these students or clients, preoccupied with thoughts or feelings about them. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the brain science behind this. But when we're exposed to someone else's trauma, oftentimes we experience it as if it's our own, right? And as we talked about, and tomorrow, if you come to my training, I'm going to go in really, really heavy detail about what happens in our body when we're exposed to trauma. But what happens to us as a secondary person listening and hearing someone else's trauma is that our brain and body react almost as though we're experiencing it ourselves. So between compassion fatigue of being in the helping profession in general and working with some vulnerable populations who have been exposed to trauma, it can lead to burnout, right? If we're not engaging in self-care. So this is work-related emotional stress plus lack of self-care can potentially lead us to burnout, where we wake up one day and we're like, I can't keep doing this. I don't want to go to work today. I'm so exhausted. And again, like I said, there's actually a science behind why burning out takes place, right? And if you're a brain nerd like me, I would highly recommend doing a deep dive into this. But when it comes to empathy and compassion for others, this isn't just because we're loving and caring people. I mean, we are, especially in this profession. I looked why we do what we do. Many of us, we genuinely care about this work. But we're also biologically designed, biologically wired to want to connect to other people. It is part of it's a biological imperative and vital for our survival for us to be connected emotionally to others. So every day, all day, whether you're aware of this or not, our automatic nervous system is constantly scanning our environment, looking for other nervous systems to want to connect with, right? There's something in our brains called mirror neurons, if any of you are familiar with it, So essentially what this is, and can be like a fun, if you're at like a work meeting party trick, if you take a drink of water and there's other people around your table that have a water bottle and someone sees you take a sip of your water, one of the other people that has their water bottle that saw you, the chances are they're then going to pick up their water bottle and they're going to take a drink out of it as well. Same thing if you yawn and then someone else yawns because they see you yawn. These are mirror neurons. Essentially what happens is when our brain sees someone pick up that water bottle and take a sip of it, our brain fires as though we're picking up that water and taking a sip of it. And then we say, oh, that looks good. I'm going to pick up my water and take a sip of it, right? Fun party trick when it comes to drinking water and to yawning. Not so fun when it comes to hearing about someone else's trauma. When we're hearing about someone else's trauma, our brain starts wiring as though it's happening to us. When we're caring and trying so hard with these kids and these families that we're working with, our brain is wiring as though it's like ourselves or our own children and families. We get very emotionally connected in the work that we do, and there's brain science behind it. So when it comes to compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout in the workplace, there's a few things that I want to really make sure that I get across to you all. Oh, the power of suggestion, someone wrote in. Absolutely, I love it. Sorry, I'm just looking. There's a lot of great things coming in the chat, and I'm also looking at time, and we still have more things to get to, so I'm not going to be able to read out everything, but I am seeing a lot of stuff popping up, and I really want to tell you I appreciate your participation in the chat. I think it just makes this, if we can't be in person, it makes this such a more collaborative conversation. So really important key parts to think about when we're talking about compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, burnout in the workplace. Fun statistic, 40 to 80% across various occupations, various helping occupations like therapists, teachers, ER workers, child welfare workers, anyone working with vulnerable populations, 40 to 80% experience some level of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, or burnout. So it's not a matter of if this happens to me, it's a matter of when this happens to me. So the goal for us is not to say, I'm never going to experience compassion fatigue. I'm never going to experience vicarious trauma. I'm never going to be burnt out. That's not the goal. That is an unrealistic goal. And for those of us who work especially in special education, we're working on IEPs, we're creating goals, we want our goals to be obtainable, right? This is not an obtainable goal. What is obtainable and what should really be our goal is to become aware of and notice when this is happening so we can utilize tools to cultivate resilience for ourselves. Again, going back to that metaphor of like we're like a cup pouring out for other people, we want to be able to identify, hey, my cup is only half full, right? So I need to start pouring some more into myself so I can continue to pour out for everybody else around me. So we're going to talk really quickly before we get into some skills that we can use to help with self-care. We're going to talk a little bit about burning out and catching the early signs of burning out. So if you see this French Bulldog up here who's tired, just very tired, let me know in the chat if you have ever been this French Bulldog before. I know that I have. Last week I was. Today I'm not, but maybe after this I will be, right? So how can we catch the early signs of burning out? So first thing what I like to do is switch our language from the word burnout to burning out, right? When we talk about the word burnout, that's like an endpoint, right? That means we're burnt out, done, period. But burning out is a process that takes place, right, over a period of time, and it's a process that we can regain control over, right? So like I said, we're all going to experience some level of burning out. The goal is how can we identify when this process is happening so we can take control over it and refill our cup. And part of it is recognizing the early signs of burning out. So we're going to look at a couple of different categories of signs of burnout. And again, have you ever been this hamster who's a little bit stressed out? I know I have. First thing we're going to talk about is physical signs of burnout. If you've been in trainings with me before, if you work with me at all, you would know that whenever I talk about mental and emotional and behavioral stuff, mental and emotional challenges, I always like to talk about the physical signs first. Our body is like so fabulous, right? Our body has a way of letting us know how we feel before we emotionally know how we feel. So if we can listen to our body will often give us those signs, especially in a job like this where we're, hitting the ground running, we're go, 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 go. We don't have a lot of time, like we did that check-in in the beginning. We don't have a lot of time usually to say like, how am I feeling emotionally right now? How am I feeling mentally right now? We often don't have that time, but if you're at work and your lower back starts hurting or your neck starts hurting, you're very aware of that, right? So we want to start with what are some of the physical signs that can happen when we're burning out. So first one, easy, physical exhaustion, right? We may also see insomnia or hypersomnia, so this is not being able to sleep or sleeping too much. Headaches or migraines, this is one of my biggest ones. I know whenever I start feeling a headache in the back of my head that I need to up my self-care because I'm feeling stressed and I'm not aware of it. Higher susceptibility to illness or even somatization, right? Which is feeling like you're not feeling well, but there's nothing like actually wrong with you. Like you go to a doctor because you have chronic stomach aches and they're like, nothing's wrong with you, which I want to validate can be very frustrating if you're someone who deals with any sort of chronic health issue and the doctors are like, nothing's wrong with you. I've had like ongoing back pain and I've had like 3 physical therapists be like, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, okay, that's not helping me, but that's besides the point. It can manifest in our body. The next one we want to look at are behavioral signs. These are my favorite to talk about, especially the first two, which is increased use of alcohol or drugs and other addictions like shopping or compulsive eating. And they're my favorite because oftentimes when we think about self-care, we think about happy hour and we think about retail therapy, right? Again, nothing wrong with going to happy hour and having a couple drinks. Nothing wrong with going shopping because it's payday and you want a new outfit, you want to feel good about yourself. I am all for that stuff. However, these two can very quickly go from acts of self-care to acts of quick hits of serotonin because we're not feeling good that last for a second and then make us feel worse, right? So if you're a person who's like, yeah, I like to go to happy hour, I go on Fridays at 5. And sometimes I go on Thursdays at 5 because Thursday is almost Friday. And then sometimes I'll go on Wednesdays at 5 because Wednesday is almost Thursday and it's almost Friday. And the next thing you know, happy hour is every day after work, right? That is a behavioral sign that this is no longer something that you're doing as a fun self-care thing, but something that you're utilizing to kind of self-medicate. The next one is something like shopping. So I know for myself, I used to work at a job. I was working at an agency where it was relatively stressful, right? And I could tell when I was when I was stressed out and not engaging in good self-care because on my way home from work, I would just happen to end up at Target. Did I need anything at Target? No. Do you need a reason to go to Target? Come on, right? So I would go to Target and I would walk around Target and Target would tell me what I needed to feel better and I would leave Target with $200 of scented candles and moisturizer and whatever else I felt I needed because I'm engaging in self-care. However, I go home, I'd light my candles, I'd put my face mask on and then I would feel exhausted again. And spending $200 at Target whenever I feel stressed was not a sustainable, economically sustainable, right? So those are two things to look at. Also, absenteeism, if you notice that you're calling out a lot or if you're a manager or a supervisor and you notice your staff are calling out a lot, that's oftentimes a sign that there may be some burning out taking place. Anger, irritable, exaggerated sense of responsibility, avoiding of clients or parents or students, right? If you see a parent coming down the hall and you duck out the other way because you don't want to talk to them. feeling forgetful, or developing personal relationship problems, right? These can all be behavioral signs that you're feeling, that you're starting to feel like as though you're burning out. So as I'm going through these, if you feel safe, and again, this is a safe, non-judgmental space here, if you want to chime in with any things that you may have experienced associated to feeling burnt out or burning out, please go ahead and write them in the chat. And then the next is our psychological signs, right? So this can be like just feeling emotionally exhausted, wanting to distance ourselves from other people, from social engagements, negative self-image, maybe feeling depressed, having reduced feelings of sympathy or empathy for others, feeling cynical or even resentful about your job, and diminished sense of enjoyment in your career, difficulty tolerating strong feelings. So I love to put these aren't great, right? We're in this field, and again, going back to the reason we're all here, most of us really love what we do. We care about the future. We care about children and families. We want to be able to show up for the children and families in the most supportive, empathic, loving way that we can for them, right? However, if we're not taking care of ourselves, this which is on the board right now are things that we may start to feel, and it's going to take us away from our main goal of being able to show up for children and for families, to show up patiently for children who may have speech delays and engage in challenging behaviors, to show up empathically for parents or caregivers who are really struggling with a child's diagnosis, right? We need to be able to take care and refill our cup consistently in order to continue to take care of all of those people around you. And I want to just take this moment to acknowledge how not only challenging, but how important the work that we're doing is, right? When we talk about self-care, it's like a marathon. It's not a sprint. We have to be continually taking care of ourselves if we want to continue to do this incredibly important work that requires an incredible amount of patience, an incredible amount of empathy, an incredible amount of showing up for other people. We need to show up for ourselves first. Okay, excellent. All right, so we talked about trauma, we talked about toxic stress, we talked about compassion fatigue, we talked about burning out. Now, what really is self-care? I know self-care is oftentimes like a buzzword that gets thrown around. Oftentimes, we're not even 100% sure what it means, right? So what I want you to think about, and I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to take, there's a couple slides where I have just like conversation. If you want to put them in the chat, that's fine. If you want to connect with someone afterwards to talk about them, that's fine too. If you want to just think about the answers to these questions yourself, I want you to think about, how do you define self-care? Why is it important? And most importantly, what gets in the way of self-care? I just saw a really good comment in the chat here that says, I totally admit I survived 30 years by eventually learning to enjoy the ride. I have to recommend myself to enjoy it every once in a while. Sorry, I'm just reading in the chat. They're talking about special ed's a roller coaster. Absolutely. So I want you to start thinking about, what is self-care to you? Why is it important? What gets in the way? Okay? What I want you to do is I want you, either as we're going through this conversation, or maybe, actually, I'm looking at the time. I want to do this activity with y'all right now. So what I want you to do, get out a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to take 30 seconds and just write down all the self-care activities that you engage in. List of activities that you enjoy and you consider self-care. I'm going to set a timer for 30 seconds because, you know, I used to work with kids, so I love to, like, time things. For 30 seconds, and I want you to write as many as you can, and then in the chat, tell me how many you came up with. Okay, so let me find my clock here. All right, you have 30 seconds, and the winner, I mean, you just get bragging rights, I guess, with how many you come up with. So starting now, write down the list of all activities you engage in that are self-care. And when you're done, when the timer's up, you can write in how many you have in the chat. All right, 20 seconds. 16, 15, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. So if you get the opportunity, just write in the chat how many things you came up with, how many were on your list. And as you're writing them in the chat, as you're looking at your list, what I want you to do is now reassess that list. And I want you to put a check mark next to the items on your list that you do regularly. So these have to be things that you do at least once a week. So I want you to take your total number. All right, so seeing some numbers come here, we have an 8 on the board. Nice. A 5. Ooh, someone wrote them all out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Playing with your kids, walking, reading. Excellent. So on that list, so count them up, tally them up. How many, what is your score of that list? Now put a check mark next to the ones that you do weekly. Okay? And then I want you to tell me if your number is the same or if your number is lower. So are there the same amount of check marks? Is there a check mark on everything that you identified? Ooh, 11, 10, 8, 12. Okay, 6, 7, 10, 5. Okay. Ooh, someone had 15 there. All right. So now, after you've looked at that list and you're looking just at the things that have one check mark, so these are just things on your list that you do weekly, put another check mark next to the items that you would say keep your self-care cup full for the week. So these are things that sustain you, right? Example, me going to Target, spending $200 on scented candles does not sustain me for the week, right? However, if I go surfing, I probably feel sustained for the week. All right, I'm seeing people come in. Lower, someone said 9 out of 11, 6 and 4 weekly, lower, lower, lower. Yes, so the goal of this, most people, as you put these check marks in, they start to get lower. So now I want you to look at how many have 2 check marks. So these are the things that are self-care that you do frequently that keep your self-care cup full. Someone said, much lower than I want it to be good. Again, we're judge-free zone here. We're not judging ourselves on this. This is just simply a way to us to kind of start to establish a baseline and to see, because oftentimes we think we're engaging in much more self-care than we actually are. When it comes to self-care, we want to really be able to understand the barriers of self-care and what's getting in the way. Again, like I said, if self-care was easy, I would not be in front of you right now. We want to look at some of our automatic negative self-talk or automatic thoughts that come up with the phrase self-care. You know, so things like, yeah, right, I don't have time for this. I have 2 kids and a partner. I'm not going to exercise. I feel guilty putting myself before other people. There's lots of things that come up for us when we think about even just the phrase self-care. So what I want you to reflect on today after we're done, and then, you know, tomorrow, if you're seeing other people in person to have some of these conversations, if you're coming to my training on trauma-informed care for kids, you want to tell me what you came up with, I'd really love to hear it. I want you to think about some of the things that prevent you from engaging in self-care. So just some thinking points for yourself. 1, do I believe that I'm worthy of self-care? 2, do I believe I'm selfish for putting my needs before others? And 3, and this may be the most important one on here, how does my culture and my socializing influence my feelings on self-care? This is really important because depending on who you are, what your cultural background is, what your gender is, you may have different ideas and views on what it means to take care of yourself. Really quickly, you know, I don't know, I think I said this earlier, like I live in Los Angeles. I work with a lot of, with the high Latinx population of educators, and a big percentage of those educators are Latinas, like Latino women, right? So within the Latinx culture, oftentimes women are viewed as the caretaker. They caretake for everyone else, and their needs kind of get put to the back, and that's how their mom raised them to be. That's how their grandma raised their mom, generationally, this idea of I can't engage in self-care, right? So I want you to think about just how that may impact your view of self-care, and I like to really say, you know, you can find your own balance, what works for you to honor your culture, right? While also honoring this idea that in order to continue to care for yourselves, you have to, or in order to continue to care for everyone else, you have to care for yourselves. Oh, it's perfect. Someone wrote in the chat, if I engage in self-care, do I take time away from caring for my family? These are the things that come up, right, for us. So I'm going to touch on them. I'm actually going to answer that a little bit in the next slide and kind of give a little voice to this idea of if I take care of myself, I'm missing out on time from caring for others. When it comes to self-care, we really have to commit to it, right? So a few things, Annie, excellent question that I think will kind of speak to that. You can't fully love and care for anyone if you're not fully loving and caring for yourself, right? So it is like we need to be able to genuinely love others and to genuinely help others love themselves. We have to love ourselves first, or else it is not genuine and we're not practicing what we're preaching. Boundaries are necessary to truly care for one another. So it's kind of like this visual, right? Where if like this is you and this is someone else, if you want to give to this person, you have to be separate, right? If I have like a handful of candy here and I'm giving and giving and giving, right? I'm having something that I'm giving to them. Without boundaries, we look like this, okay? If I have a handful of candy and it looks like this, I can't tell where I end and where the other person begins, and whatever candy I have is just now like our candy. It's impossible to really care and give to another if you're not caring and giving to someone else. The other thing I really like to tell people, especially people that, you know, feel guilty for engaging in self-care, that feel like they're not giving enough time to other people, and especially if you're someone who has kids of your own, I want you to think about your kids, right? Your family. And I want you to think about when your kids become adults, do you want them to be able to take care of themselves? Do you want them to be able to make themselves happy, to meet their needs while also meeting others around them? And usually the answer to that question is yes, absolutely. I want for my kids when they become adults to be able to take care of themselves. You're going to be the model for them to do that. They're looking at you, they're watching you, they're going to learn how to do that from you. And then, like I said before, culture and self-care do not need to be mutually exclusive, right? I cannot speak for, I'm up here a very white passing person. I cannot speak to anyone else's culture and what's best for your culture. You can honor, like, that's up to you, and you're, you know, each and every one of us needs to figure out a way to really honor our culture and honor ourselves in the right way that works for us individually. Just some good stuff in the chat here. My children have learned to know when I need to take time and to take some time for my personal self-care. They tell me, Mom, you need to relax and take a break. Yeah, your kids are calling you out on your self-care. I love it. They're little advocates. Okay, we are running low on time, but I do want to spend the last 15, 16, 17 minutes or so talking about some things that we can do in our day-to-day to continue to keep our cup full. So lots of times, like I said, we look at self-care like, I'm going to take a vacation in 2 months. I'm going to go 2 months. I'm going to go to the spa in 3 weeks, right? That's not enough. We're pouring out that cup every day, all day for kids at work, parents, coworkers, and our family at home. We need to be finding little things to pour back into our cup in the day-to-day, things that don't require a lot of time, that things that we can just do and kind of interweave into our daily practice. So, You all have copied the slides. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this in the interest of time, but really what I want us to think about when we're looking at self-care is that there are many different areas for self-care, right? There's professional self-care, which is taking care of our personal or our professional lives, right? This is like taking your lunch breaks, calling out when you're sick, which I'm hoping at this day and age everyone's now taking very seriously. Physical self-care, which is caring for our bodies. Psychological self-care, which is taking care of our mental health. Emotional self-care, taking care of our emotions, our heart, how we're treating ourselves. Spiritual self-care, ensuring that we're, if it's important to us, engaging in some sort of connection to like a higher power, universe, the ocean, coffee. And then personal self-care, which is really prioritizing just things that we do because it makes us happy, right? Learning an instrument, reading a book, things along those lines. Oftentimes we can do things that can fall into all of these different categories. So with 15 minutes left, I'm going to leave you. We're going to talk about a couple different skills that you can, the goal is to be able to implement these into your day-to-day life. So the first one is getting in tune with your body. Like I said before, I love to start with our body. Our body will give us information about how we're feeling before we have information with how we're feeling. So oftentimes we want to listen to our bodies and see what it's telling us. Common things our body will tell us when we're feeling stressed: headaches, maybe our heart rate will go up, maybe our muscles, our joint feels stiff. We may feel it in our stomach. Those are all kind of like the key areas where we hold stress. Another way we can kind of get in touch with our body is to utilize it in moments when we're either at work or even at home and we feel triggered. So I know for those of us that work with kids with behaviors, raise your non-hand that I can't see or write in the chat if you've ever been triggered by a child's behavior. This happens all the time. We get triggered by children's behavior. We get triggered by parents. We get triggered by coworkers. Lots of things can trigger us, right? A big way that we can kind of continue to take care of ourselves in those moments is to check in with our triggers. Oftentimes triggers are like the body signaling there's a fire alarm when there's no smoke or flame, right? So it's like our body is being activated that like something dangerous is happening when nothing dangerous is happening, but our body is taking it in, right? Sherry, the last domain on there, sorry, I'm just looking in the chat, was personal self-care. So this is doing things that's just things that you like to do for yourself. And I believe I have that on the slides that should be accessible to you. I know I had to go through that slide a little bit quickly, but thank you, Sherry, for asking. So what we can do in the moment when we're feeling triggered is we can do a quick body response, right? We can scan our body to identify like what is happening. Why am I feeling triggered? Where is this showing up for me in my body, right? I know recently I was running a group for teachers and someone said something, oh, I know what it was. They were talking about like wanting to expel a kid for behavior, and that's one of my biggest things, which again, I'm going to talk a lot about this tomorrow. I'm hoping I'm setting you all up to come watch me, to come listen to me tomorrow. It really triggers me when people talk about suspending and expelling young children. So I was like, where am I feeling this? I felt it in my heart. I felt it in my stomach. I felt it like in my blood pressure in my neck. I could feel my pulse getting faster, right? Scanning your body, checking in with your breathing. Okay, like my breathing is getting shallow. Something's happening in this interaction for me. My heart's beating faster. Something's happening in this reaction for me. And really what this does is while I'm doing my body scan, checking in, listening to my body, it's putting some space between the situation and my reaction, right? So oftentimes when we're stressed, we're triggered, we have very quick responses, and oftentimes those responses, because they happen so quickly, are ones that in retrospect we go back and we say, oh, that I did not handle that the best way I could have. I wish that I had handled that differently, right? By stopping and moving through our body and trying to identify where we're being triggered, how it's showing up in our body, that puts space and time between what's happening and what we're doing. It allows us to stop and calm ourselves a little bit, right? So one thing I invite you to do, and this is an act of self-care. An act of self-care is to stop and attend to your body when you're feeling triggered or upset or frustrated by something. Again, I want us to rethink what self-care is. Like, yes, vacations are fun, but self-care can happen every single day for us if we allow it to. And if we allow ourselves to give ourselves 3, 5, 10 seconds to check in with our bodies when we're feeling triggered, that is going to allow us to also settle our bodies and to re-enter the conversation in a more calm and collected way. So that is one way that we can engage in self-care for our bodies. The next one is breathing. Oh my goodness. So I know you probably hear all the time, and you probably told this to kids all the time, take some deep breaths, take some deep breaths, take some deep breaths. There's actually a science behind why this works, and I love deep breathing because this is something that we can do in any setting. You can be in a classroom setting and feel yourself getting overwhelmed, and you can do some slow, deep breathing to be able to calm your nervous system down. So there's a couple different ways. There's no wrong way to do deep breathing as long as you're consciously breathing in and breathing out in a slower manner. You're doing it correctly. So one way that I'm going to talk about breathing is belly breathing. So what I want you to do is place one hand on your heart and your other on your abdomen. So go ahead and do that right now. And what you're going to do is you're going to inhale slowly and deeply through your nose. And while you're doing that, I want you to kind of your hand on your belly to push it out, right? So feel as though as you're breathing in through your nose, you're inflating a balloon on your belly. So just breathe in through your nose like that and inflate that balloon. Great. And when you do that, so you can breathe out, we'll do that again. When you inhale, I want you to pause for a moment and then exhale fully through your mouth. And I want you to kind of purse your lips a little bit, like this. And I want you just to imagine as you're exhaling, your body just relaxing. And you don't have to get caught up on like how many seconds in and out. What I want you to try to do is just have your exhale breath be a little bit longer than your inhale breath. Oh, someone wrote co-regulation. This is all about co-regulation, right? Taking care of ourselves to take care of others. So we're going to do a couple breaths. We're going to do 3 together. So one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly. So now we'll breathe in through the nose. Pause. Slow exhale through the mouth. Okay, again in through the nose. Pause, slow exhale through the mouth. One more in through the nose. Pause, slow exhale through the mouth. Okay, how does that feel? You know, it never fails because I give this training. I always run out of time at the end, no matter how I adjust things. And I always put this belly breathing is in near the tail end, and then I like feel so calm that I'm like, oh, how am I gonna speed through the rest of the slides? So this is just something that you can do anytime you're feeling dysregulated. These 3 cleansing breaths, right? So often, like I recommend trying this in transition periods, right? So if you're transitioning from like being in class to lunch, right? If you're transitioning from being at work to being at home, right? 3 deep breaths before you get out of your car. So one thing that tends to happen, and I don't know if any of you can relate to this, you have such a busy day at work, and then you sit in traffic to get home, and then you park home, and then you fly into the house, and then you know you're there with your partner, your kids, or your cat, or whoever you have at home, and you're bringing all that energy from work right into home. So doing these 3 deep cleansing breaths is a great way to kind of transition yourself from work mode into home mode, right? You can also do this when you're feeling triggered, and this really just changes your emotional state. So the science behind this is when we get stressed out and when we get anxious, it activates our stress response. And again, I'm plugging my training tomorrow. We're going to talk about in detail. Your stress response gets activated. Your fight or flight gets activated. And essentially what happens is your breathing gets shallow because your body's preparing you for something. So if you can slow your breathing down, it's almost as though you're tricking your body and your brain into thinking that you're not stressed, because you can't have slow, calm breathing and have shallow stress breathing at once, right? So this physiologically can lower your stress system just by doing that level of breathing. One number is 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. I say to do what works for you. Okay, we talked about our body, we talked about our breathing, we're going to talk about our mind. So I'm actually, let's see, how are we doing on time? Ooh, we have 5 minutes left. Okay, I'm going to go kind of quick through this one. I invite you to take longer to look at your slides. But one thing that we can do to kind of recalibrate our mind if we're feeling stressed out is to utilize a mantra, right? This is just one phrase, one positive phrase. I have a couple examples on the corner of the screen. I'm not going to go super into the brain science behind this, but essentially, when we're feeling very stressed out, oftentimes our brain gets stuck on like a negative loop, right? And then we get all sorts of negative thoughts coming in and stressful thoughts coming in. If we can integrate a mantra, so for example, I have control over how I feel, and I choose to feel peace. I have control over how I feel, and I choose to feel peace. This sounds kind of corny and kind of woo-woo, I'm not gonna lie. However, if we can say a positive statement over and over and over again, we're going to start to rewire our neural connections away from like the stress thought patterns we're in to more positive to more positive thought patterns. And the beauty of this is you can do this in your brain anywhere. If you're in class, if you're talking to a parent, if you're in a supervision with a staff and you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, all you need to do is find a mantra. All experiences are helping me grow. All experiences are helping me grow. Even if you don't believe it, if you fake it until you make it, you're going to start to reduce the neural connections of stress and negative thoughts. They're going to lessen as you start to input a positive mantra. And then last but not least, for mindfulness, one great thing you can do, and again, these are acts of self-care. These are acts of self-care that you can do in your mind that take 30 seconds, right? I'm sure most of you have heard this before. You can also do this with the kiddos, depending on the age that you work with, is the 4-3-2-1. So this is something to do if you're feeling overwhelmed that's really grounding, right? So basically what you do is you notice 4 things that you can see. So for me, I would say water bottle, phone, my mask, the computer. 3 things you can hear. So for me, it would be the computer. I heard like a light switch in the background, and I heard someone's voice outside. 2 things you can smell. There's not a lot of scent in here, but I think I can kind of smell like the plastic from the keyboard, and maybe just like the air from outside, the air from the AC. And then 1 thing you can feel, I can feel this chair underneath me. By doing that, this activity enables you to just ground yourself and be present. Oftentimes when we're feeling stressed out, it's our body's way of telling us we're in danger, like we need to protect ourselves, we need to plan for the future, or like, a lot of times we're ruminating on the past, right? So doing this mindful 4-3-2-1 activity, super easy, takes 30 seconds. We can do it in our minds, and it allows us just to stay a little more present and recenter. So those were all things that, the idea is you can be pouring into your cup little by little throughout the day versus white knuckling it to like your next vacation, right? However, there are some heavy hitters, so some things that may require a little bit more time and effort, but I have to mention them because, we know empirically that they help us with stress and wellness. Therapy, I'm not just saying that because I'm a therapist. I strongly recommend therapy. Please, it's honestly, it's just a person to process with. And if you don't know how to find a therapist, come find me tomorrow and I will help you with that. Exercise, right? Even if you just go for a walk, even if you just go to the mailbox and back, even if on your 15-minute break, you just walk down the hall and back, getting your body moving. Meaningful time with friends and family, finding hopefully the friends and family that don't cause you even more stress. Meditation, mindfulness, this is a huge one. This is hard. I will totally be honest that I have trouble with this one as well, but really meditation helps you stay present, helps really kind of clear yourself, and allows you just kind of identify what your brain's doing. For those of you that have any sort of like fellowship, a church, a temple, any sort of group of people that you do something, I have my fellowship of surfers that I go surfing with on the weekends, people that you get together with that you have common spiritual connections or even just common interests with, and activities just for fun, right? So these are things that, you can try to weave into your life that we know will increase self-care. Wow, we are right at 10:30. We went all the way to the end. I know we got a little bit fast there right at the end. I just want to take this moment to thank you all for coming to this. If you want to write anything in the chat, anything you took away from this conversation, now's the time to do it. Like I said, the work that you all are doing is so incredibly important. And the fact that you're showing up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a virtual screen because you want to learn about how to take care of yourselves, create resilience for yourself to continue having resilience for everyone else is just absolutely phenomenal. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm so excited for you all to attend the rest of the talks and trainings that we have over the next few days. And I hope I see many of you out there tomorrow. And someone said, where can we find the slides? I believe they are on the app. They're downloaded there and you can upload them. So thank you all so much. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day today.